Hi, I'm doing Paul McWhorter's Pico W lessons and we're currently up to lesson number 33, but I keep going off on various tangents on what I can or can't do on the Pico W, and after I've already tackled the problem of how to protect your Wi-Fi details and your code by compiling your programs. And then I did the web using web REPL in Thonny to remotely connect to your Pico W. And then I thought what would be good is to have a server to supply updates of programs to your Pico Ws. And I was looking at this, and YouTube, after I had posted my solution for the web REPL thing, YouTube sent me a suggestion, and it was a video by Kevin McAleer, who works at Pimoroni, I think, who was showing how to do over-the-air updates on your Pico W, but using Github. Now, the advantage of Github is it doesn't matter where in the world or what network your Pico W is, it can always connect. And it was very, very simple thing. He was just passing a file name to GitHub. Well, no, looking, he was taking a file name, which is the one that he wanted to update, and then looking for it on GitHub. And what you had was you had the new, the latest code for that program and a version number on GitHub, and you then looked on your Pico W to see if you had a version file, and if you didn't, you assumed you were on version 0, and if you did, you you compared the versions and you downloaded it if necessary. And the beauty of doing something like this is you can put it to run in your main.py, and then when it's done everything, then it will drop down and do what you would normally have in your main.py. Anyway, I will just run my version of it, which is a bit more complicated, just to show you what happens. Now, if we look in Files here, you will notice, oh, I don't know what that is. That, I don't think that's anything to do with it, but no version file, no test 6, I think it is, I'm not sure, maybe it's test in there, and no, nothing really to do with that. So that means we can safely run this and it will be as the first time. So my program isn't passing a file name to it. What it does is it goes onto GitHub and then looks at the version file, and then it sees whether the files in the version file are available to download. I will run it and show you. Right. Current versions on Pico W, 2 curly brackets, means there wasn't a versions file. Then we've connected, oops, go back. We've connected to Wi-Fi. Then it's getting the latest versions on GitHub, which only has one entry in it, which is test.py, and it's version 3. Now, we just saw that test.py wasn't on the Pico, so it says adding test.py, update completed, and then what it does is it restarts it, and hopefully it will go through with no updates, and it will run it again. But I hadn't put it in main.py, so it won't run it again. Ignore what I said there. Right, we will go into Files, and there is versions.txt, which means that I've got the version 3 of test.py, and then we'll look at test.py, and that was what I had in the program. That's great. Now if we run it again, it will be connected. Latest versions, they're the same. So it says it's up to date, no new updates available. Great. Right, next test. If we, I need to show you the directory tree, or whatever you call it, for on GitHub. I've created a directory called Pico OTA update, which is what I use for everything. And then within that, I'm creating a directory for every Pico W that I might want to do this for. And the directory name is just Mac, followed by the MAC address of the Pico W. So if we go into here, there's all sorts of things, but what we're interested in is versions.txt and test.py, which was the one that I uploaded. So if we look at versions.txt, it's version 3. So if we want to see what will happen, if I change this to versions.4, commit changes. My Wi-Fi is slow, so I'm not sure how soon this will actually be updated. Well, it says it is, but maybe that's using a local copy. So we'll try running it again. This might not work. Right, if we run it again, no, it hasn't updated it yet. So we'll go back to here. Sometimes if you put in another update, it will push the previous one through quicker. So we're now up to version 5. Commit changes. That will probably have pushed it up to either 5 or 4, who knows. So we'll try running it again. Current is 3. Oh no, that's still 3. This isn't a problem with my program, it is a problem with GitHub being, well, my internet being slow. Right, even though I've updated it to 5, it's still saying 4 there, which hopefully means that by now the changes will have been committed. Third time lucky. I could try doing something else. Now, the problem with this is that it's only, poor Macaleer was only coping with programs that were in your let us see, only in the main bit of your Pico W storage, but in your lib you have to do something else. So there's nothing there. So if we change the test.py file again, and I've got a copy of what I want to do. Right, so this is in text. I need to convert it to a dictionary. So if we put in a few more things, if we put in the first 3 entries, copy, do that, paste, commit changes. by now something ought to have happened. If it hasn't, I could just show you the program first of all. We'll get out of that. Now my program, whoops, need to block that out later. I had to load in, no, not load in, what's the word? I had to get pathlib onto my Pico W so I could import it because I needed it. And what my program does is it's setting up the path to get to the repo, which is GitHub blah 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 blah. Then that's my GitHub account, then Pico OTA update, and then I've just put Mac of WLAN, so that's my Mac address. And first of all I'm getting, and then I've set up the version URL by just adding versions.txt on the end. So that is when I'm just getting the versions file for my Pico W, and if it doesn't exist, I've just created an empty one. Then I'm connecting to Wi-Fi as per usual. Then this is where I'm having to take the string and make it into a dictionary. So I'm splitting it by comma, and then I'm splitting it by colon, and then that means I can actually get it into dictionary format and displaying it. And this response.close, after you've done response equals uRequest.get, is very important, as I found to my cost, because if you don't do it after I don't know how many calls, you run out of memory and it's so difficult to find out what's going on. So then it's just printing the latest versions on GitHub, and this bit here is where we do the business. But I will demonstrate before we do that what happens if you haven't created the directory on GitHub for that particular Pico W. So I've just changed that to CC so it won't find it. Run that, and it says that either the directory or the versions file is not in repo, so therefore there aren't any latest versions, and it just stops. So that's good. Right, we'll just test to see what happens if I'm looking for a different versions file, misspelling it, and hopefully the same thing will, I don't believe that. I changed the wrong, stupid me, I changed the one that I was looking for on the Pico W, which was stupid. I was meant to be changing that. Ha! That panicked me for a while. Try running this. And again it says either the directory or the versions file not found on repo, which is great. Exactly what we wanted. Now we'll try running again, and hopefully it will be looking I don't know what that committed actually. Right, that's what it is. Yeah. Hopefully we're trying to update test.py, and I'll change that to a higher version. Main2.py doesn't exist, so it ought to tell me because I don't have the file available to download, and then that is seeing whether I can update one that is within the lib subdirectory on the Pico W. So we will commit changes, and who knows what version of versions will be coming up, but we'll just try and see. So if we run this, it will tell us latest versions on GitHub. Oh, that happened really quickly. So test PY is a later version, so it ought to be updated. That error message, I forgot to warn you, that error message will always come up. That is part of the plan because it's trying to restart it before it's ready. Now, so the latest versions on GitHub, that one, test.py, ought to be updated, and that's what it says. Then I've put in lib/test3.py, so that means it ought to be adding that to the lib file on the Pico W. And then main2.py doesn't exist, so it says it isn't found, update completed. Then I forgot to show you that message. It says restarting device, ignore error message, which I didn't tell you to, so you're probably panicking. Right, so if we go on to files to see what's happened, we've still got versions, which we'll have a look at. Oh, I'll shut that, don't want to look at that. Versions, right, test.py is now version 4, and lib/test3.py is that. Okay, close that. Look at test.py. Well, that's the same. Maybe I should have changed the text to make sure that it was changing. And we look in lib, and as if by magic, test3 is there. Look at it. And so I've managed to successfully add something to lib, which is great. Get rid of that, get rid of that. Back to my program. And I didn't show you my Wi-Fi details this time. Right, so where were we? This is where it actually does it. I've got a flag saying something done because it's very difficult to know, to remember whether anything actually has been done. So I'm looking for the file now. I'm going through the file names in the dictionary that version, you know, the dictionary that is on the GitHub repo, and seeing whether the file exists. And if it doesn't exist, it just goes, ooh, not found, and it goes and reads the next one in the latest versions. Otherwise, I'm splitting up the file name into the path for it and the file name. So now I've got that. I'm on the Pico W, I'm saying, hello, is this file name in this path? And if it is, I'm just saying it needs to be updated or not, depending on the latest version. So I'm checking the latest version. If it's up to date, I just continue. And if it isn't up to date, I will be updating it. Otherwise, if the file name didn't exist in that path, I'm adding. Now this is where it gets sneaky. Whoops. That try and accept, that OS error will be caused by that path not actually existing on the Pico W, which causes problems when we try and add it. So what I've done is I've used pathlib, the method path from pathlib, to create a new, the directory structure to be able to add that file name. So then we come down, and then we go response.close to tidy it up so it won't run out of memory. Now, next thing, we've got the latest code that we've downloaded for the file that we're dealing with at the moment, and then we write it to a file on a temporary file on the Pico W called latestcode.py, and then we rename it as the proper file name, and that will go to the right place, regardless of whether it's in the main directory, whether it's in the lib directory, or whether it's in a directory we've created. It doesn't matter. And then I just say the current versions of that file name is the latest version of that file name. So if it wasn't already in there, it will create a new entry in my dictionary file, and if it was, it would just update it. I've set the flag to say something done is true, and if something is done, update completed, and I save the versions file, the current versions file, to my Pico W, restart and reset, and then it will, if asked to, it will run again. Otherwise, it doesn't bother to save the new versions file because there are no updates available. So I can't remember what we've run. Or we'll just try running again. And rather than running it, you can... Oh no, I haven't got it set up as main.py. Forget I set that. Now, as you can see, we've only got, at the moment on the Pico W, we've got test.py, which is 4, version 4, and the libtest3.py, which is version 1. So after connecting the latest versions of the GitHub, now you can see that one's up to date, that one's up to date, and that one isn't there. So no new updates available. So we go into here, and this time copy, we go into versions and we edit it, and we do that. Right, just for the sake of completeness, I'll change that to what it ought to be. Right, test.py should do nothing because it's the current version, or is it? I can't remember. Just in case, I'll change it to 3. Main.py doesn't exist, so it will do nothing. libtest.py is version 1, so it won't do anything. Then I've got this tempdir3 test6 version 5. Now what that ought to do when I run it, it ought to create a directory from the main part of the Pico W and put in it test6.py, and then this is seeing whether I could create a temp.lib directory followed by a lib.a followed by lib.b and doing that. So I will commit those changes, and I should have committed those changes while I was talking because it would probably take quite a long time to do it. Right, that looks up to date, but who knows what my Pico W will be doing. We'll keep our fingers crossed. No, still hasn't updated. It won't do anything. Right, I will just mention, while we're waiting, I will just mention something else. I could have put in, whenever I'm printing out things, like not waiting for connection. If I print out perhaps the current versions on Pico W and the latest versions on Github, and then when I say whatever is found on the repo, or file name is up to date, updating, adding, whatever. I was thinking that I could write that out to a log file, but I thought, where is the best place to put my log file? And I thought, well, if the repo for this thing, if Mac 28 CD blah 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 doesn't exist, then I couldn't write it there. So I thought the obvious place to put my log file would be here. So I would have all the Mac blah blahs for each Pico W, and then within the Pico OTA update I will have a log file that will log everything that's happened to any of the Pico W's, and you can ignore test.py. I put that there by mistake. So if we go back into here and we go back into versions, hopefully it will be updated by now, but in case it hasn't, so apart from adding the log file, and I didn't do that really because I haven't learned how to use GitHub very well. This is the first time I've actually really used it to my own stuff, and you have to be able to save a file to GitHub, you need to have tokens, and it was all too much for me and too much for this video. And the other thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to put in a delete function. So as opposed to adding a file to your Pico W or updating a file on your Pico W, you could put a delete function, which would have been quite simple. But then you think, well, if I delete it from one of my directories, if the directory is now empty, do I delete that directory? And then going back up, if you're in a long chain of directories and they are empty, do you leave them, as in lib.a and then lib.b, then whatever? Do you leave them empty or do you delete them? Because I couldn't work out. Anyway, who's interested in that? So we will try running this again, and hopefully GitHub is up to date. Oh good, it's up to date. We'll just wait for it to go through, because it'd be embarrassing if it went wrong. Right. Now, this time, current versions, blah, 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 blah. Latest versions. Now, the latest version and test version don't have to be equal. Sorry, the latest version and the current version doesn't have to be equal. So the latest version could actually be earlier than the current version. You still wouldn't update it. So that says test.py is up to date. Then we're looking at the tempdir 3.test6. Now that didn't exist, so it says we're adding that, which is fine. main2.py not found on repo, well, it wasn't. And what else do we need to look at? Then it says adding templib /lib.a/lib.b/test7. Now that is just to see whether I can create the directory structure, and yeah, and libtest3 is, oh there it is, libtest3 is already up to date. So all we have to do now is have a look at files, and oh no, we don't need to make that a bit bigger. Right, well, first of all, look at versions.txt, which test.py hasn't been changed down to 3, which is good. Right, there's a temp dir 3, temp lib, and the lib test. So the version file looks fine. We've still got that, nothing's changed. Right, we're looking lib, and there we have test 3, nothing's changed. But we do have temp dir 3 here. So if we have a look at that, and we have test6.py, have a look at that the program. Will it work with only one new directory? Yes, it did. And then we've got this directory temp lib with another directory lib A within it, lib B, test7. Have a look at that. Blimey, it has actually worked. Right, so I know this is very confusing. It was very confusing for me, but it was just to give people an idea what you can do with over-the-air updating. I've just shown you my password. I'll have to get rid of that. Over-the-air updating, and hopefully it helps. You could look at Kevin McAleer's video. It's very simple, just to show you how he did it. So we will, that's my video, that's my program.